In 2016, the Chinese artists Sun Yuan and Peng Yu presented an art installation titled as Can't Help Myself, which features an industrial robotic arm in a glass enclosure, repeatedly attempting to clean and sweep back a dark red liquid reminiscent of blood from beneath its base structure. However, the attempts of the robotic arm to contain the liquid ultimately fail, as every programmed sweep is followed by the spread of the liquid back into its original space, crucially representing the futility of the programmed tasks to contain and control an environment that perpetually resists mechanized regulation, while symbolically portraying the mechanized and technologized enforcement of human violence through its imposition of spatial boundaries and the cycles of containing human suffering and bloodshed. Sun Yuan and Peng Yu's Can't Help Myself is directly aligned with the ideas of the 20th century American philosopher and historian Lewis Mumford, who coined the term Megamachine to describe a centralized socio-technical system in which humans are reduced to mere components, existing at the mercy of an impersonal, mechanized structure that prioritizes control, efficiency, and domination over human and organic autonomy in the era of modernity. For Mumford, who had witnessed both the devastating impact of industrial technology during the two world wars and the rapid rise of technological advancement throughout the 20th century, these experiences exposed him to the realities of technological modernity and its role in reshaping human societal arrangements. This prompted his analysis of the intricate relationship between technology, human hierarchies, and societal structures. Fundamentally, he observed how human ways of life and perceptions of reality were increasingly integrated with and dictated by the rationality of technological apparatuses. In the context of history, Mumford argues that Western civilization has developed dueling forms of technologies, suggesting that the first form, which he describes as biotechnics, is highly compatible with life-affirming and democratic societal arrangements, as biotechnics prioritizes technological capacities that work harmoniously with the Earth's natural processes and ecosystems. On the other hand, he describes the second form as monotechnics, which is aligned with life-denying and authoritarian societal structures, as monotechnics utilizes technological capacities for large-scale mechanical, resource-extracting and consuming purposes. Whilst Mumford defines these two forms of technologies as producing opposing frameworks, forces and drives, Mumford ultimately considered the two forms as intertwined, revealing themselves simultaneously throughout history, with biotechnics usually merging into monotechnics, as the material conditions of human societies transform over time to maintain densely packed large-scale human populations. As he suggests in his 1967 two-volume book titled The Myth of the Machine, that, from the beginnings of civilization, we can now see two disparate technologies have existed side by side, one democratic and dispersed, the other totalitarian and centralized. The democratic mode, based on small-scale handicraft operations, was kept alive in a multitude of little villages, in partnership with farming and herding, though spreading into the growing country towns and finally lured into the cities. For wherever the population was concentrated in large cities, where a large-scale organization of a landless and increasingly traditionalist proletariat took place, compulsive methods made their way even into the processes of handicraft and progressively mechanized them. The large-scale organization of the proletariat in specialized workshops and factories, using what now seem like modern methods, is reasonably well documented for the Hellenistic and Roman world. In this way, the original practices of the Megamachine began to pervade even the more humane institutions derived from an earlier economy. In this sense, biotechnics corresponds to the forces of life, creation and growth, whilst monotechnics corresponds to the forces of Promethean destruction. This historical process towards ever greater structures of technical and rational power is, according to Mumford, aligned with a Western reverence for a mechanical mode of existence, one archetypically exemplified in the centralized temple-based hierarchies of ancient Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Roman civilizations, but philosophically rooted in the transcendent divine orders of Platonism and Christianity. For Mumford, it is the layering of human hierarchies throughout history in conjunction with an assemblage of expanding monotechnical capacities that culminates in what he considers the power complex of the Megamachine, from which all domains of life are to correspond as closely as possible to machinic forms of organization, as Mumford declares regarding the ancient origins of the megamachine. Cosmic order was the basis of this new human order. The exactitude in measurement, the abstract mechanical system, the compulsive regularity of this megamachine sprang directly from astronomical observations and scientific calculations. Such order, such collective security and abundance, such stimulating cultural mixtures were first achieved in Mesopotamia and Egypt, and later in India, China, Persia, and in the Andean and Mayan cultures, and they were never surpassed until the megamachine was reconstituted in a new form in our own time. With this proto-scientific ideology went a corresponding regimentation and degradation of once autonomous human activities. Mass culture and mass control made their first appearance. With modern symbolism, the ultimate products of the megamachine in Egypt were colossal tombs and the Great Pyramids. What are they but the precise static equivalents of our own space rockets? Both devices for securing, at an extravagant cost, a passage to heaven for the favored few. Whilst the pharaohs and pyramids of the ancient era have since given way to billionaires and corporate skyscrapers, the totems and systems underlying the megamachine of capitalist modernity in the 21st century are now to be embodied in, although not limited to, data and communication centers, surveillance systems, social media platforms, stock exchanges, energy grids, and military networks, all of which serve to reinforce a highly centralized technocratic order that perpetuates hierarchies of exploitation and ecological destruction, as the Earth, under the hegemony of monotechnic systems of power, is rendered as a mere resource to the behest of a techno-scientifically enthralled and enchanted billionaire elite. For many contemporary writers, such as the American scientist and historian Jared Diamond, humanity's dependency on overbearing monotechnic systems of centralized production, resource extraction, and technological infrastructure represents a precarious foundation for modern civilization, as the disharmony between human societies and the Earth's delicate ecosystems, in addition to rising wealth inequalities and systemic vulnerabilities, reveal the possibility of civilizational erosion and potential collapse in the wake of the Anthropocene. As Diamond declares in one of his most notable books, titled Collapse: How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed, which explores the historical conditions relating to the collapse of ancient civilizations, that the risk of such collapses today is now a matter of increasing concern. Indeed, collapses have already materialized for Somalia, Rwanda, and some other third world countries. Many people fear that ecocide has now come to overshadow nuclear war and emerging diseases as a threat to global civilization. The environmental problems facing us today include the same threats that undermined past societies: human-caused climate change, buildup of toxic chemicals in the environment, energy shortages, and full human utilization of the Earth's photosynthetic capacity. Most of these threats, it is claimed, will become globally critical within the next few decades. Either we solve the problems by then, or the problems will undermine not just Somalia, but also first world societies. As influenced by the German psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, Mumford heralds the human condition under the megamachine as producing death-driven energies and impulses, as the mechanization of existence positions life itself as something void of organic agency and frames the Earth as something to be rationalized and subordinated. In this context, the realities of a death-driven civilization have cultivated the increasing dehumanization of society, reducing human existence to a mechanistic state of being and reinforcing hierarchal divisions between human and non-human life, all whilst amplifying the risks of nuclear war and ecological collapse. For Mumford, however, an existential awareness of deathly energies and the inevitability of human mortality serves as a foundation for transcending the mechanical mode of existence, as this awareness opens pathways to alternative, life-affirming ways of being, rooted notably in symbolic construction and organically holistic understandings of the human relation to the Earth. In the wake of the expansions in computational data, artificial intelligence, automation, and surveillance technologies, which threaten to expand global capitalist hierarchies and human technological dependencies and prioritize efficiency over ethics, Mumford's analysis of the megamachine remains crucial for understanding the accumulation and proliferation of centralized, technologically enhanced power in the 21st century. Throughout the early to mid-20th century, Freud's theories of the tripartite psyche, comprising the id, ego, and superego, played a significant role in shaping the discourse of modern psychology and the understandings of the human mind. According to Freud's theories, the id bears the heaviest mark of human evolution on the human psyche and is closely related to the Darwinian animal instincts of reproduction and survival. The id's drive for immediate gratification and instinctual satisfaction is regarded by Freud as the pleasure principle, which seeks to fulfill basic desires and urges without considering the full constraints of reality or societal norms. Moreover, for Freud, the ego is the rational, reality-orientated part of the psyche that mediates between the id's instinctual desires and the external world. This mediation between pleasure and preservation, Freud considered as the reality principle, from which pursuits of pleasure and rationality are postponed but not completely abandoned, as Freud declared in his 1920 book titled Beyond the Pleasure Principle, that, under the influence of the ego's instincts of self-preservation, the pleasure principle is replaced by the reality principle. This latter principle does not abandon the intention of ultimately obtaining pleasure, but it nevertheless demands and carries into effect the postponement of satisfaction, the abandonment of a number of possibilities of gaining satisfaction, and the temporary toleration of unpleasure as a step on the long indirect road to pleasure. Similar to, but ultimately different from the ego, is the superego, which represents the internalized moral standards and societal norms that guide the ego towards ethical behavior and self-control. Following from the destructive events of World War I and Freud's psychological research into repetition compulsion, which typically oversaw patients repeatedly acting out traumatic past experiences, Freud brought attention to what he considered an unconscious drive towards repetition and self-destruction, which he labeled as thanatos, or the death drive. Whilst grounded in the id, the death drive goes against both the reality and pleasure principle, as it seeks to eliminate life's tensions and energies by returning to a state of inertia or non-existence, heralding it as a movement towards death. In contrast to thanatos, Freud considers eros, or the life drive, as a diverging force that seeks to ensure growth and creation, driving individuals towards connection, pleasure, and the construction of meaningful relations, in addition to the preservation of the species. Eros, or life drive, in this sense, seeks to establish greater unities between individuals, society, and the earth, nurturing cohesion, cooperation, and the continuation of life, as well as the creation of new forms of meaning and existence through art, love, and culture, and overcome the alienation, fragmentation, and destruction of thanatos, or the death drive. Eros operates from the beginning of life and appears as a life instinct, in opposition to the death instinct, which was brought into being by the coming to life of inorganic substance. The inorganic substance Freud is referring to is the state of non-living matter or inorganic matter that existed prior to the emergence of life, which is what the death drive seeks to return towards, either by expending such energies upon oneself or onto others. Crucially for Freud, the struggle between eros and thanatos is intrinsic to human existence, with civilization itself serving as a site from where humans attempt to balance and manage the conflicting drives of life and death. The ultimate aim of this struggle is the preservation of a fragile civilizational project, which strives to survive amidst the conflict of these two opposing forces. Man's natural aggressive instinct, the hostility of each against all and of all against each, opposes the program of civilization. This aggressive instinct is the derivative and the main representative of the death instinct, which we have found alongside of eros and which shares world dominion with it. Civilization presents the struggle between eros and death, between the instinct of life and the instinct of destruction, as it works itself out in the human species. This struggle is what all life essentially consists of, and the evolution of civilization may therefore be simply described as the struggle for life of the human species. Although Freud's theory of the tripartite psyche is taken up in the works of Lewis Mumford, he reconsiders Freud's theories by historicizing and extending such analysis beyond the individual psyche to examine how these drives manifest in societal structures, technological systems, and the development of human civilization itself. Notably, Mumford challenges Freud's depiction of the human psyche as being primarily shaped by a Darwinian Malthusian evolutionary struggle for survival and competition, instead drawing inspiration from the works of the 19th century Russian anarchist Peter Kropotkin. Mumford advocates for a more holistic view of the psyche, one rooted in evolutionary tendencies towards cooperation, mutual aid, and organic interconnectedness. In Mumford's reinterpretation of Freud's theories, the death drive, therefore, is not innate to all humanity or to be seen across all aspects of human history. Rather, it is seen as emerging throughout specific historical periods, often coinciding with the formation of complex societal hierarchies and increasing human mechanization. Human history, in this sense, according to Mumford, has produced dueling value systems and modes of thought, with the mechanical mode of production emphasizing human progress and creation through expansion, extraction, and societal verticality. By contrast, more organic modes of production throughout history typically lead to more interrelated, earth-bound, and socially horizontal forms of civilizational expression. As Mumford declares regarding human development, so long as the machine was uppermost, people thought quantitatively in terms of expansion, extension, progress, mechanical multiplication, and power. With the organism uppermost, we begin to think qualitatively in terms of growth, norms, shapes, interrelationships, implications, associations, and societies. We realize that the aim of the social process is not to make men more powerful, but to make them more completely developed, more human, more capable of carrying on the specifically human attributes of culture, neither as snarling carnivores nor insensate robots. For Mumford, however, the human unconscious is both a wellspring for creativity and a repository for irrational impulses, from which human culture serves as a stabilizing force against the chaotic and potentially self-destructive impulses rooted in the unconscious, as he declares that, before man had created a firm overlayer of culture, through ritual and language, he was dangerously open to the random, often destructive and suicidal promptings of his own unconscious. That danger still remains. As influenced by the likes of the 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche and the 20th century German analytical psychologist Carl Jung, Mumford heralded human participation in the symbolic life of a higher mythic culture as providing the necessary foundations and channels for human energies to be dispensed in life-affirming and culturally constructive ways, in contrast to Freud, who perceived human culture and morality as a dialectical compromise through which humans primarily repress their instincts in order to maintain the stable structure of civilization. Mumford argues that culture, language, rituals, and symbols play a more nurturing and less repressive role, from which the superego channels and maintains transcendent higher human ideals to aspire towards, whilst recognizing that such higher ideals can always be inverted and do not always guarantee the redirection of primordial drives towards life-affirming outcomes. Mumford nonetheless rejects Freud's biological determinism, suggesting in his own words that such life-denying forces are a historic phenomenon, time-conditioned, place-conditioned, and culture-conditioned. According to Mumford, human societies that witness a surge in destructive tendencies leading to civilizational collapse undergo common processes of unbalanced and overburdened accumulation of resources in urban centers, which paves way for unbridled elitism, mass exploitation, ecological disruptions, and the erosion of societal values. In the context of ancient civilizations, Mumford argues that the construction and expansion of the citadel, or megalopolis, is at the heart of this process towards nihilism and eventual collapse, from which he states that each historic civilization begins with a living urban core, the polis, and ends in a common graveyard of dust and bones, a necropolis, or city of the dead. Fire-scorched ruins, shattered buildings, empty workshops, heaps of meaningless refuse, the population massacred or driven into slavery. Between what Mumford identifies as the polis and necropolis lies the parasitopolis, a stage of urban development fueled by the excessive accumulation of tribute, wealth, resources, slaves, and urban labor under a centralized system of command. Dominated by oligarchic elites, this phase burdens the urban population with relentless economic exploitation and unceasing demands for production. The parasitopolis, however, holds profound psychological consequences for its host population, leading to what he considers the Megalolopolis. This next stage of development emerges from the pervasive encroach of urbanization and mechanization, which deprives the human body of a sensory relation and connection to the earth, inducing in the human body and psyche a plethora of pathologies, illnesses, and dysfunctions, as the desensitized urban body seeks out immediate gratification and experiences of intoxication. It is in this alienated and suppressive state that the frustrations of existence reveal themselves in acts of transgression and violence against the established order of society. As Mumford states, the vices, perversions, corruptions, parasitisms, and lapses of function increase disproportionately, so that Parasitopolis turns into Patholopolis, the city of mental, moral, and bodily disorders, and finally terminates in Necropolis, the city of the dead. The stages of the Parasitopolis and Patholopolis preceding the collapse of the city harbor what Mumford describes as negative vitality, a force through which human energies are accumulated, unleashed, and ultimately depleted to the detriment of the urban population within the city. Whilst Mumford's analysis primarily focused on the ancient cities of Babylon, Nineveh, and Rome, he cautioned that similar patterns of exhausted human vitality were re-emerging in modern Western, particularly American cities throughout the 20th century, as new urban centers became increasingly governed by systems of technical efficiency and rationality. Avenues for escaping this mechanized relationship to the city began to emerge, manifesting themselves in both transgressive behaviors and new pathologies centered around sensory experiences and instantaneous gratification. To counteract an intolerable preoccupation with arithmetical abstractions and mechanical instruments, an almost equally abstract interest in the stomach and the sexual organs are divorced from their organic relations. To counteract boredom and isolation, mass spectacles, to make up for biological inferiority, a series of collective games and exhibitions are based on withering specializations of the body. In short, the metropolis is rank with forms of negative vitality. Nature and human nature, violated in this environment, come back in destructive forms. Drugs, anodynes, aphrodisiacs, hypnotics, sedatives are a necessary accompaniment of this exacerbated state. Indeed, for the 21st century, cities such as New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo, London, Paris, and Mumbai are epicenters of mental unwellness, substance abuse, and various other forms of addictions, where the pressures of urban life, economic competition, wealth inequality, social isolation, and the alienating effects of modern technology converge to exacerbate destabilized psychological conditions and undermine individual urban well-being. Cities such as Las Vegas, Tokyo, London, and Bangkok are further renowned for their excessive, deregulated, hyper-consumerist nightlife scenes, which typically encourage the exorbitant indulgence of intoxicants and an escape from the mechanized realities of urban life, all while squandering human energies into often addictive and antisocial behaviors. Additionally, the notion of the modern technical city, as attached to a pathology and denial of the senses, is brought up in the writings of the contemporary Finnish architect and philosopher Juhani Palasma, from which he declares that the inhumanity of contemporary cities can be understood as the consequence of the neglect of the body and the senses, and an imbalance in our sensory system. The growing experiences of alienation, detachment, and solitude in the technological world today, for instance, may be related to a certain pathology of the senses. It is thought-provoking that this sense of estrangement and detachment is often evoked by the technologically most advanced settings, such as hospitals and airports. The dominance of the eye and the suppression of the other senses tend to push us into detachment, isolation, and exteriority. In keeping with the pathos of the city, urban centers, despite advancements in sustainable development, continue to serve as epicenters of resource accumulation and energy consumption, as modern cities account for 60 to 80% of global energy use and produce 70% of greenhouse gas emissions, so as to sustain the furtherance of economic production, infrastructural development, and the worker-consumer lifestyles that characterize large-scale urban populations. Undoubtedly, the modern city also continues to be perceived as a site of pervasive oligarchic wealth concentration, commodification, social media performances, accumulative labor, surveillance, and other techno-economic imperatives that prioritize efficiency, profit, and digital enhancement over the felt and participated experience of the city. More specifically, cities in the United States, such as Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Austin, and Miami, have further been subject to the techno-scientific, accelerationist ideologies of Elon Musk and other Silicon Valley-based billionaires who perceive cities and urban spaces as stages for the acceleration of techno-scientific progress and for the vitalization of free market expenditure. In other such cases, billionaires from across the world have proposed the creation of new cities as possible techno-utopias for the flourishment of global capital, as enforced through vigorous biopower techniques, such as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's NEOM project, which seeks to establish a futuristic line-structured city in the northwest of Saudi Arabia, from which urban life is to be strictly governed by digital surveillance, algorithmic controls, and corporate-run services. In all such cases, the accelerationist perception upon the city reveals class-based discrepancies on the purpose and function of cities and urban spaces, as major metropolitan centers across the world increasingly serve the interests of multimillionaires and billionaires against that of the urban inhabitants. For Mumford, the psychological and material structures of the modern 21st century city, or megalopolis, reflect the defining traits of the patholopolis and parasitopolis, as these conditions signal deeper societal stagnations and foreshadow the possibilities of collapse. Whereas Mumford envisioned the superego as a guardian of life-affirming values within a given society, under the mechanical mode of existence, it becomes subjugated, immersed in a trance-like state, driven by fantasies of endless expansion and the relentless accumulation of power. In this condition, he warns that the city, under the influence of a capitalistic mythos, concentrates upon bigness and power. The owners of the instruments of production and distribution subordinate every other fact in life to the achievement of riches and the display of wealth. Physical conquest by military means, financial domination by trade and legal processes, loans, mortgages, speculative enterprises. The agricultural base extends, the lines of supply become more tenuous. The impulse to aggressive enterprise and enterprising aggression grows as the lust for power diminishes the attraction of all other attributes of life, as the moral sense becomes more callous and the will to culture increasingly impotent. Standardization, largely in pecuniary terms, of the cultural products themselves in art, literature, architecture, and language. Mechanical reproduction takes the place of original art. Bigness takes the place of form. Voluminousness takes the place of significance. Triumph of mechanism in every department. Passivity, manual helplessness, bureaucratism, failure of direct action. Mumford envisions the megamachine of the city as an intricate, interlocking system composed of machines, techniques, bureaucrats, armies, and scientific and administrative elites, a techno-capitalist apparatus that integrates both inorganic and human components. Within this structure, the superego is reduced to serving abstractions that fuel the infrastructure and power of the machine itself. Deprived of a value-creating superego to aspire towards, the ego is diminished under such a structure, reduced solely to the fixations of the present moment. Subsequently, the id, lacking direction from a guiding ego, seeks immediate gratification through the outputs of the machine, such as mass commodities, entertainment, and other stimulants. However, as these channels fail to provide lasting fulfillment, the id turns inward, becoming increasingly transgressive and destructive in its attempts to satisfy unmet needs, as the megamachine continuously extinguishes human values and meaning, all whilst increasing desires and discontentment to reality itself. Mumford warns that the city ultimately drifts towards the necropolis, a stage of decay, death, and collapse. Although not fully aligned with Mumford's specific stages of decline, the 21st century cities of Mosul, Bakhmut, and Gaza resonate with his concept of urban centers overwhelmed by negative vitality, or in this case, an externally imposed negative vitality that expends human energies on annihilation and undermines the foundations of human existence. Indeed, Mosul and Bakhmut were reduced to ruins through violent military conflict, whilst Gaza continues to suffer from both military bombardments and systemically enforced deprivation. In these instances, such cities are transformed from historically lived spaces of value creation and dwelling into graveyards of human civilization, reflecting Mumford's vision of cities devolving into necropolises, where human values are overridden by nihilism and life-ceasing apparatuses of power. According to Israeli psychologist Yoel Eliza, his research into the psychological states of numerous Israeli soldiers uncovered post-human and divine-like conceptions of personal strength and the capacity to unleash power during Israeli military operations in Gaza. Eliza details these findings in an article for the Israeli media platform Haaretz, stating that, "We identified 5 groups of soldiers based on personality traits. A small callous group was composed of ruthless soldiers, some of whom confessed to violence before the draft. These soldiers committed most of the severe atrocities. The power they received in the army was intoxicating. It's like a drug. You feel like you are the law, you make the rules. As if from the moment you leave the place called Israel and enter the Gaza Strip, you are God." They viewed brutality as an expression of strength and masculinity. This sense of intoxication and enjoyment in the exercising of military supremacy over Gaza can further be observed in social media posts made by Israeli soldiers, who intertwine acts of violence and destruction with a sense of triumph, celebration, playfulness, and performative spectacle, often framing their actions through humor, memes, and exaggerated visual displays of dominance. Here, social media algorithms and the dehumanization of Palestinians converge to create a feedback loop cycle that sustains Israel's genocide as a spectacle, transforming acts of destruction into shareable online content that reinforces ideological narratives, desensitizes audiences, and normalizes militarized aggression within Israel's digital landscape. In this context, Gaza becomes a mere playground for the militarization and expenditure of vengeful and aggressive energies to coalesce. Further reports by various human rights organizations have also emphasized the Israeli military's increasing reliance on computerized systems and artificial intelligences to draw data from Israel's vast surveillance systems and seemingly make targeted predictions on Gazan residents believed to be associated with Hamas, ultimately designating the Gaza Strip as a space of measurement, data points, and algorithmic variables for the seemingly precise maximization of Israeli military capacities. Whilst Israel claims that such techniques are refining their abilities to make accurate decisions on targets and minimize the possibilities of civilian casualties, organizations such as the Human Rights Watch argue that such systems are actually exacerbating the risk to Palestinian civilians and raise profound ethical, legal, and humanitarian concerns on the use of such technologies. For Mumford, the deathly and nihilistic state of modern societies is exacerbated and amplified through a reciprocal relation between the masses and elite in their boredom towards a mechanized earth. As Mumford declares of the ruling elite throughout history, that nothing is more striking throughout history than the chronic disaffection, the malaise, the anxiety, and the psychotic self-destructiveness of the ruling classes once they are in command of all that the heart can desire. For the dominant minority, the privileged few, have always been faced with the ultimate curse of such a meaningless existence, sheer boredom. The erosion and devaluation of higher, life-affirming values in favor of a machine-driven system of input and output induces a state of dependency and apathy among both the elites and masses, revealing a psychological regression to a more debased level of consciousness, one sustained by the unchecked and unquestioned hegemony of megatechnical systems and structures of power. We have submitted, even in democratic countries, to an unconditional surrender of the higher aspects of human life, justice, art, love, truth, fellow feeling, and have elevated into a position of command all the lower aspects of group existence, tribalism, irrational hatred, brutality, pathological self-assertion, and self-adoration, all piously masked as a patriotic obligation. The automaton and the id, The uncontrolled machine and the unconditioned brute have captured the normal sphere of the personality. It will require only a little further commitment to machines already in existence, a little further de-evaluation of the person, a little more contempt for life and the values of life, before modern man, out of his boredom and purposelessness, if not out of destructive malice, will let loose his weapons of total extermination. He may do this, though everyone knows, as General Douglas MacArthur observed in 1945, that there can be no victory for either side in a Third World War, no victory and no peace. If our present state of unbalance continues, with art degraded and imagination denied, our present society, for all its powers of organization, will bring on its own downfall. Under the ascendancy of the Megamachine, humanity is stripped of its vital impulses for imagination and creation on a mass scale, qualities that Mumford views as essential to human history and cultural development. The suppression of these life-affirming drives in favor of perfecting mechanical systems, therefore, reduces humans to their most rudimentary attributes. In Mumford's analysis, this regression leaves humanity governed by the id and the seemingly mechanical functions of the body, effectively turning individuals into automatons who operate and exist in accordance to the apparatus of the machine. From this repressive and dehumanized state, humanity seeks to assert its own autonomy and agency, striving to break free from the utilitarian rationality imposed by the machine and exert ecstatic modes of human consciousness. However, it is precisely in this struggle for agency that Mumford argues that the death drive emerges with full intensity. Reflecting on the conditions of industrial modernity leading up to World War I, Mumford observed and declared that the death wish appears as a collective impulse, an effort to save life from further defeats, from more unbearable indignities, through suicide. This attempt by humanity to enforce its own hierarchal importance over and in accordance to the machine crucially results in its own nihilistic descent into self-annihilation, as Mumford further declares that, so vital are the autonomous activities of the organism, so necessary are they for keeping it whole, that any surrender of independence has deep psychological repercussions, particularly the infantile feeling of dependence, prolonged into adulthood, awakens self-distrust and self-hatred, which exacts a suicidal desire for revenge. The impotent develop a craving for virtual, if not active power, while those who have not lived their own lives experience a violent desire to impose a humiliating death on others. To atone for the limitations of a parasitic into existence, the parasite himself transposes the values of life so that all his acts take a negative form. The hatred the parasite feels for himself, he projects upon suitable victims and scapegoats, covering them with his own despair, his own self-loathing, his own desire for death. Building on Nietzsche's observation that the era of scientific and industrial modernity has heralded the death of God, Mumford similarly contends that humanity's unconscious is left in a void, unmoored and directionless condition, deprived of a sustainable meaning or a higher transcendent state of being and purpose to aspire towards. In this absence of guiding metaphysical values, primordial drives are more likely to surface, manifesting in man's desire to feel power in a world that no longer enchants or empowers humanity outside of the confines of the Megamachine. For the power complex has not merely deliberately disrupted salutary customs and undermined traditional moral values. What is even more serious, it has transferred all the stabilizing, repetitive processes from the organism to the machine, leaving man himself more exposed than ever to his own disordered subjectivity. No longer does daily work and religious ritual demand that active participation which serves to incorporate the diverse ingredients needed for balance in the human psyche. As a result, the unconscious has now resumed its earlier dominion over man. What is worse, the pre-human properties of the unconscious now command powerful technological resources they never before had at their disposal. Indeed, as man's intensification for power increases, it is inseparable to the powers of the machine, enabling new channels for primordial drives to be harnessed by the technological extensions of the human body and mind. For Mumford, the convergence of the scientific and industrial revolutions, reinforced by the enduring legacies of Platonic and Christian metaphysics, not only redefined life as a series of mechanical operations, but also cultivated the modern belief that a select group of techno-scientific elites possessed the enhanced power to manifest divine creation and impose divine order. In this new secular foundation for modernity, organic forms of life and organization were increasingly devalued and supplanted by artificial systems, which were idealized as the pinnacle of civilizational perfection, against that of a chaotic and irrational world beyond the domain of human civilization. As Mumford reaffirms, he who creates a perfect automaton is in fact creating life, since, according to mechanistic doctrine, there is no essential difference between living organisms and machines, provided that they work. But beneath this magic wish was a more insidiously flattering idea. He who creates life is a god. Hence, the very idea of a creative deity, which science from the 16th century on had regarded as a superfluous hypothesis in analyzing matter and motion, came back with redoubled force in the collective persona of organized science. All those who served this god participated in his power and glory, and for them was the ultimate kingdom. In the 21st century, techno-science and its accelerating potentials are often enshrouded in deeply mystical and theological modes of thought, with tech entrepreneurs such as Avi Schiffman, Mark Zuckerberg, Ray Kurzweil, Elon Musk, and Peter Thiel openly acknowledging the seemingly divine, godlike force that animates modern technology, particularly as it relates to recent developments and advances in artificial intelligence, which is perceived as not only accelerating the material order of human societies under capitalism, but as further accelerating human bioevolutionary processes. Indeed, both Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil stress the significance of an AI singularity, a point at which artificial intelligence becomes fully conscious, autonomous, self-reproducing, and endowed with superintelligence. With this understanding, both Musk and Kurzweil advocate for a transhumanist cause, envisioning a future where humans are integrated with this superintelligence in order to overcome death and achieve human immortality. Other expressions of techno-theologism can be observed among the likes of tech billionaire Mark Andreessen, who argued that any deceleration in the development of AI technologies would result in preventable future deaths, framing the absence of AI advancements as a moral failure, even equating it to an act of murder. In Andreessen's perspective, AI is elevated to the status of a near-messianic entity, endowed with a teleological purpose to alleviate human suffering and prevent human deaths here on Earth. Consequently, the pursuit of AI development is portrayed as an essential and justified sacrifice for the greater good. With regards to the decentralized cryptocurrency Bitcoin, the entrepreneur Michael Saylor has used overtly religious language to describe such currency, claiming on Twitter that Bitcoin is truth, Bitcoin is for all, and that Bitcoin is a shining city in cyberspace waiting for you. In all such cases, technology is not merely framed as a tool of utility, but as a sacred, immutable source of truth and salvation in an otherwise unstable and fragmenting world. Technology companies claim to provide unparalleled community by bringing the world closer together, as Meta tells us in a post about why we build, and by offering hope for a more connected future, as Mark Zuckerberg put it in his 2021 keynote about the metaverse. Tech investors like Mark Andreessen pronounce themselves the patron saints of techno-optimism, claiming humans are becoming technological supermen. In a manifesto containing the words "we believe" no fewer than 113 times, Andreessen boasts that the techno-capital machine may be the most pro-human thing there is, liberating the human soul. And tech executives like Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey do the seemingly impossible by carrying that vision even further, announcing that technology is on a mission to extend the light of consciousness, as Dorsey tweeted in 2022 to explain his choice to sell Twitter to Musk. Musk had tweeted a year earlier that he was accumulating resources to help make life multiplanetary and extend the light of consciousness to the stars. In other words, Musk would take humanity to a kind of promised land, and according to the effective altruism movement and the many tech billionaires who fund it, technology, specifically godlike AI, poses no less than a 10% risk of annihilating every single human being within the coming century. For the philosopher Nolan Gertz, such techno-theologism, expressed by the elite of Silicon Valley, has been brought about by the elite's own techno-scientific nihilism of the 21st century, which has afflicted various billionaires with god complexes, perceiving themselves as the masters of nature and the saviors of a declining civilization. Historically, Silicon Valley's origins are also indebted to the American eugenics movement of the early 20th century and the military-industrial complex of the mid-20th century. Contemporary advancements in military infrastructure and genetic engineering, therefore, echo these earlier ambitions of improving humanity and expanding the warring technological capabilities of the human, reflecting a persistent drive to reshape both society and biology through technological mastery. In Mumford's analysis, the totemization of the megamachine stems from its perceived immutable superiority over mortal organic forms of life. This perception empowers an elite to dismiss the Earth's ecological reality and evolutionary history, as well as the legacies of human history, philosophy, culture, and tradition, in favor of the immediacy of extraction and production, which operates within an eternal present, detached from historical continuity. The machine, in this sense, appears to withstand the tides of transformation and fluctuation, presenting itself as an immortal and perfected form, in contrast to the transient, chaotic, and metamorphosing nature of organic life. This illusion of eternality and omniscience is further mirrored in the ambitions of the techno-capitalist elite, who revel in the power of the machine and aspire to transcend mortality by emulating its permanence and perfection. For Mumford, the severing of humanity's connection to the Earth's ecological systems is most exemplified in the structure and operation of the modern city, or megalopolis, from which the megamachine additionally sustains itself through the masses' belief in its inherent perfection and superiority. Here, the relentless pursuit of technological progress and economic efficiency overrides the organic rhythms of human life and its symbiotic relations to the Earth. This relentless drive towards mechanistic perfection, hailed by a techno-capitalist elite as the pinnacle of progress, ultimately estranges humanity from its ecological and historical foundations, leading to societal desolation and ecological collapse. As Mumford warns, the unchecked expansion of the megamachine propels civilization towards decline, reducing cities to sterile, lifeless landscapes and paving the way for the expungement of human meaning and existence. As Mumford declares, instead of bringing life into the city, so that its poorest inhabitant will have not merely sun and air, but some chance to touch and feel and cultivate the earth, these naive apostles of progress had rather bring sterility to the countryside and ultimately death to the city. Their city of the future is one level down to the lowest possibility of active, autonomous, fully sentient life. Just so much life as will conform to the requirements of the machine. As we shall see, this would only carry the present forces at work in Megalopolis to their ultimate goal, total human annihilation. Whilst the system of the megamachine in the 21st century has undeniably produced positive advancements in global communications, space exploration, healthcare, medicine, biotechnology, and certain fields of artificial intelligence, it has nonetheless simultaneously bolstered conditions conducive to techno-scientific nihilism and hierarchies of global capitalist dependency. These conditions have engendered the rise of mass consumerism, mass surveillance, global wealth inequality, mass poverty and pollution, global wars of imperialism, and most specifically, the relentless extraction and consumption of the Earth's natural resources, all of which contribute to the escalating crisis of climate change and ecological collapse. For the Korean-German philosopher Byung-Chul Han, progress in the era of capitalist modernity is a pathological drive, set upon an Earth devoid of enchantment, from which its inherent destructive potential is concealed and legitimized by the institutions and language of the Enlightenment. As Han suggests in his 2021 book, Capitalism and the Death Drive, that what we nowadays call growth is in reality random, cancerous proliferation. We are currently living through a frenzy of production and growth that seems like a frenzy of death. It is a simulation of vitality that conceals a deadly impending catastrophe. Production increasingly resembles destruction. Humankind's self-annihilation may have reached a point where it can experience its own annihilation as a supreme aesthetic pleasure. This view is further supported by the German author Fabian Scheidler, who explores the history of Mumford's notion of the megamachine and argues that the Earth is reduced to a mere site for the exercising of pathological power complexes, transforming the planet into a vast repository of immiseration, destruction, and waste, all for the enrichment of a nihilistic elite with unrelenting megatechnical powers. As Scheidler states, we are witnessing how the entire planet, which took 4 billion years to develop, is being used up by a global economic machinery that produces vast quantities of goods and mountains of garbage at the same time. Insane wealth and mass misery, massive overwork, and forced inactivity. A visiting alien would consider this a completely crazy system, but there is indeed a method to this madness. At the core of it all is the unrelenting increase of wealth stored in the bank accounts of a relatively tiny number of individuals. Today, 42 men possess the equivalent of that owned by the poorer half of the world's population. It seems that the only remaining goal of the global megamachine is to incinerate the Earth for a small clique of the absurdly super-rich and add endless rows of zeros to their bank accounts. In Mumford's analysis, however, the death drive and human domination of nature through a megatechnical system are not inherent qualities of the human condition. Instead, he suggests the possibility of transcending these destructive tendencies through an existential engagement with the symbolic in the processual construction of the human and its place in the modern world. In rejecting the Promethean mechanical mode of existence, which lends itself to self-destructing tendencies, Mumford offers an alternative model grounded in organic relations and human historical continuity. The human, according to Mumford, does not stand apart from the natural world and is ingrained in the ecological systems of the Earth from which it shares various common attributes. These common qualities, however, are not limited to mere biological structures and instincts, such as reproduction and nourishment, but are further exemplified in purpose-seeking attributes, which Mumford ascribes as a form of organic teleology towards self-growth and self-transformation in all living organisms. In contrast to the vertical, mathematical structure of Plato's Republic, often seen as a precursor to the philosophy underlying the megamachine, Mumford draws on Aristotelian teleology to offer a more nuanced understanding of human societies, which emphasizes the polis as a teleological construct that respects the natural needs, limits, and self-actualizing potential of its inhabitants. This stands in contrast to the artificially imposed ideals of abstracted systems, which suppress the agency of individuals and undermine the community's capacity to realize its own collective potentialities. As Mumford reaffirms, because Aristotle's philosophy was basically that of a biologist, rather than a mathematician, he brought to the discussion of cities something that Plato lacked: a knowledge of the immense variety of species and an appreciation of the endless creative manifestations of life itself. With this came an understanding of the teleological, goal-seeking, self-actualizing nature of all organisms, and of the natural limits that define normal growth. For Aristotle, the ideal was not a rationally abstract form to be arbitrarily imposed on the community. It was rather a form already potential in the very nature of the species, needing only to be brought out and developed. The causal and teleological attributes which imbue an organically relational society, therefore, provide the possibilities to not only survive and expand, but to further bring forth new ways of societal arrangement and apprehending the place of the human in relation to other organisms. Whilst Mumford confines the teleological processes of non-human organisms primarily to material and physical transformations, he identifies the human mind as a unique emergent property that enables humans to move beyond that which is purely biological and material, towards forms of symbolic thought and sophisticated communication. Through these abilities, humans can share, shape, and transmit complex ideas on a large collective scale, cultivating advanced levels of collaboration and societal formations. As Mumford states, the social division of labor, found in some degree in all human societies, was made possible by an even earlier human advance: the invention of symbolization and the development of language. This is the most specifically human characteristic, and it has given a special kind of cohesion to the human community, that which results from a common response to a common group of symbols. Man's natural environment is complemented by his eidolon, and by eidolon I mean a symbolic milieu composed of images, sounds, words, fabrications, and even natural objects to which man has attached a representative value. Symbolic representation makes possible an interchange of experiences without respect to immediate limitations of time and space. As man found ways of creating permanent symbols in stone or reproducing his symbols by manifolding and copying, he has been able to make larger and larger areas of his otherwise private experience available to other men, though they are separated from him by birth or distance. Mumford's concept of the eidolon serves as a bridge between humanity's inner and external worlds, where the active interplay of mind and body externalizes the dynamic inner life of the human through symbols, artifacts, tools, and other material creations. This externalization enhances humanity's capacity to engage with and understand their environments, values, and ideas, within which deeper worldly and cosmic meanings about human existence and purpose emerge. In stressing the importance of human symbols, Mumford declares that the ability to create symbols and respond to symbols is an essential difference between the world of brutes and the world of men. Without symbols, man's life would be one of immediate appetites, immediate sensations, limited to a past shorter than his own lifetime, at the mercy of a future he could never anticipate, never prepare for. In such a world, out of hearing would be out of reach, and out of sight would be out of mind. By means of symbols, man builds a coherent world out of patches of sense data and gleams of individual experience. Examples of such ancient forms of human symbolic communication might include the geometric patterns of the Neolithic period, the indigenous North American thunderbird, the Sumerian cuneiform, the Assyrian star of Shamash, the Egyptian Ankh, the Christian cross, and the tree of life, which is to be symbolically found across various historic civilizations. All such symbols depict humanity's attempt to understand and communicate with the world beyond the immediacy of its materiality, typically connecting the material world to transcendent realms and/or conditions. In encapsulating complex understandings about human existence, the cosmos, divine forces, and worldly cycles, various ancient civilizations have crucially sought to convey profound truths about the nature of humanity and the universe it finds itself located within. In this context, Mumford argues that human evolution has been shaped not only by natural selection, but also by cultural selection. Human existence, he contends, is deeply reliant on the capacity for creative symbolic thought, which has enabled the creation of complex civilizational structures and concepts that extend far beyond mere physical manipulation of the material world. The mind has supplemented natural selection by a cultural selection that has not only modified man's own environment and his ways of life, but has brought out new potentialities in his own nature, such as the playful mastery of mathematical abstractions, which could not have been anticipated when man began to count on his fingers. Until the invention of symbols, technological progress through manipulation and manual work played only a small part in that basic transformation. Mumford cautions, however, that in spite of humanity's conceptual, intellectual, and technological advances, such progressive achievements have unforeseen consequences, from which he states that, while evolution discloses occasional leaps and creative sorties, it also reveals lapses, reversions, arrests, and lethal maladaptions. And just because of man's superior neural equipment, superior but unstable and extremely fragile, even his best technical advances have often been halted or have been perverted and misapplied. In mastering the art of flying, for example, man released himself from his land-bound condition, but this triumph carries disconcerting limitations. In pursuit of speed, man has already restored, in even more restrictive form, the limitations he sought to escape from, and has become a mere transportable mass, theoretically shrinking in size as he approaches the speed of light. Other profound consequences of human symbolic thought in the development of new technologies are evident in the creation of Fritz Haber's Zyklon B, a chemical pesticide developed by the German Jewish scientist in the early 20th century. Initially used for disinfestation in grain storage, it was later repurposed by the Nazi regime during the Holocaust as a chemical weapon for mass extermination in gas chambers. Similarly, the generation of atomic energy in the early 20th century was hailed as a progressive development, promising clean and efficient energy for modern societies. Nonetheless, it also paved way for the invention of the atomic bomb by the United States during World War II, which dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In this respect, the potentialities offered to humanity's self-creation and self-actualization are fragile and often contradictory, leading to both the proliferation and possible annihilation of life. The interrelationship between humans and technology, therefore, demands thoughtful and deliberate ethical consideration, particularly regarding its use, application, and broader impacts on the world. Notably for Mumford, the monotechnical rift between the human body, land, city, and non-human ecologies represents a profound and enduring rupture, cautioning that these fractured relations, along with the technical systems they sustain, could easily be inverted, weaponized, and turned against life itself during periods of economic decline, warfare, or revolutionary upheaval, moments from where the masses are potentially most vulnerable and most dependent. For Mumford, however, even such human acts of destruction and self-annihilation reveal degenerated attempts for humanity to transcend its material limits and invigorate life on the brink of collapse. Under the Megamachine, therefore, a mechanically imposed symbolic order continues to direct the course of human existence, but is fundamentally misdirected and channeled into anti-life tendencies. By contrast, Mumford proposes that authentic transcendence is to be found in the symbolic life of the mind and the role of the Eidolon, which bridges human creations, perspectives, alternatives, and prospects to the material world, enabling humans to existentially rediscover values, meaning, and direction in their life world, and achieve authentic individuation on a collective scale. Ritual, art, poetry, drama, music, dance, philosophy, science, myth, religion are accordingly all as essential to man as his daily bread. Man's true life consists not alone in the work activities that directly sustain him, but in the symbolic activities which give significance to both the processes of work and their ultimate products and consummations. There is no poverty worse than that of being excluded by ignorance, by insensibility, or by a failure to master the language from the meaningful symbols of one's culture. Those forms of social deafness or blindness are truly death to the human personality, for it is through the effort to achieve meaning, form, and value that the potentialities of man are realized, and his actual life in turn is raised to a higher potential. In surrendering unconditionally to the power system, with its automation of automation, modern man has forfeited some of the inner resources necessary to keep him alive. Above all, animal faith in his own capacity to survive and to reproduce his kind, biologically, historically, and culturally. In the act of dismissing the past, he has undermined his faith in the future, for it is only by their convergence in his present consciousness that he can preserve continuity through change and embrace change without forfeiting continuity. This and nothing less is the way of life. The elevation of human existence to overcome the total encroachment of the Megamachine, therefore, lies in the symbolic milieu and its possibilities of sustaining human values and agency beyond the limits of any one particular mortal body. As Mumford declares, when the organism dies, the brain dies too, with all its lifetime accumulations, but the mind reproduces itself by transmitting its symbols to other intermediaries, human and mechanical, than the particular brain that first assembled them. To engage with the symbolic world, beyond the mechanistic input-output routines dictated by the Megamachine, opens pathways for human creation to connect with the past and be reimagined and synthesized into innovative forms for both the present and far future. This process crucially elevates novel avenues for self-actualization, enabling humanity to transcend mere functionality and cultivate deeper meaning and purpose. At the core of Mumford's supra-organic relational framework between the human and the convergence of past, present, and future is creation and destruction, a process of being, and passing. In this processual dynamic, creation represents humanity's capacity to forge and shape their life world, whilst destruction clears the way for renewal and transformation. In this respect, an awareness and closeness to the realities of life and death become a catalyst for individual and collective actualization. As Mumford reaffirms, in his resistance to death, man has often achieved a maximum assertion of life, like a child at the sea's edge, working desperately to build up the walls of his sandcastle before the next wave breaks over it. Man has often made death the center of his most valued efforts, cutting temples out of the rock, heaping pyramids high above the desert, transposing the mockeries of human power into visions of godlike omnipotence, translating human beauty into everlasting stone, human experience into printed words, and time itself arrested in art, into a simulacrum of eternity. Indeed, whilst various civilizations throughout history have risen and fallen, leaving behind the ruins and remnants of once thriving societies and cultures, many of their creations have endured throughout the centuries, influencing and integrating into subsequent cultures, with some even persisting into the modern day. These legacies include, although are not limited to, the architectural designs of the Egyptian pyramids and the Parthenon of ancient Athens, the mathematical insights of the Pythagorean theorem and the intricate calendars of Mesoamerica, the practices of ancient Indian yoga and Chinese tea culture, the enduring celebrations rooted in Roman Saturnalia, and the advanced measurement tools of Sumeria and Babylonia. Each stands as a testament to the transient nature of the symbolic world, as a historical continuum, providing new foundations for humanity to reshape its life world, all while simultaneously enabling the world to reshape humanity in return. Even when a culture disintegrates, the loss is never quite complete or final. From the total achievement, much will remain and leave its imprint on later minds in the form of sport, play, language, art, customs. Though few Westerners have seen a Hindu temple, the Sanskrit root for mother and father still remains on their tongue in addressing their parents, more durable than any monument, and this symbolic debris of past cultures forms a rich compost for the mind, without which the cultural environment would be as sterile as that of the moon. In this unfolding dynamic throughout history, the human, according to Mumford, unbound by biological determinism, holds the potential to embody new forms of thought and ways of life, distinct from previous modes of existence and active in the shaping of the future that follows. Human relations to the cosmos, Earth, non-human organisms, technology, society, and most importantly to themselves, are not fixed characteristics, but temporary conditions shaped by an interplay of impermanent forces allowing for ongoing human actualization and redefinition, whilst death and the possibilities of annihilation permeate Mumford's broader philosophy and socio-historical analysis. Mumford was responding to what he saw as the impending downfall of modern Western civilization under the weight of a megatechnical mode of existence in the 20th century. The mechanization of life, as caught amongst the vast network of the Megamachine, is accordingly not only ruining the biological and psychic life of the human individual, but threatening to extinguish the Earth and all living organisms, as the mechanized human is further separated from the Earth's natural ecological systems and cycles. For Mumford, this is most clearly exemplified in the Megalopolis, where human life is embedded and extinguished within a rigid, grid-like structure of organization, reflecting the controlled rapid flow of energy in computational systems. The nihilism of human values and meaning, which arises from the Megamachine, however, only deepens the desires of the ruling elite, who are bound to the systems of the Megamachine and can only perceive their power within the established hierarchy of control over the Earth. This leads to what the contemporary philosopher Byung-Chul Han describes as a supreme aesthetic pleasure of annihilation, as they seek to emulate its immortality and harness its most destructive qualities for total domination, all whilst relentlessly extracting and consuming the Earth's natural resources to enrich themselves in the sustenance of global capitalism. The machine is therefore revered as a new god, the most perfect idol for fulfilling human energies, and perceived as providing transcendent qualities for humans who aspire to divinity themselves. Indeed, many in the current day continue to cling to the belief in endless economic growth and the boundless potential of techno-scientific progress, often elevating the machine above organic life. This faith in technological superiority perpetuates the discourse that mechanization and progress can resolve the very crises they have instigated, whether that be labor automation, climate change, overconsumption, global wealth inequality, or the threat of nuclear war. This reliance and dependency on the machine crucially blinds humanity to its systemic relationship with technology and the earth, taking these relations to be naturally ordained. As Jared Diamond reaffirms, technology only enhances humanity's ability to do things, and depending on how those things are done, they will derive either positive or negative outcomes. Technology alone cannot provide penultimate solutions. As he declares, technology will solve our problems. This is an expression of faith about the future, and therefore based on a supposed track record of technology having solved more problems than it created in the recent past. Underlying this expression of faith is the implicit assumption that from tomorrow onwards, technology will function primarily to solve existing problems and will cease to create new problems. Those with such faith also assume that the new technologies now under discussion will succeed. Most of all, advances in technology just increase our ability to do things, which may be either for the better or for the worse. All of our current problems are unintended negative consequences of our existing technology. The rapid advances in technology during the 20th century have been creating difficult new problems faster than they have been solving old problems. That's why we're in the situation in which we find ourselves. Crucially for Mumford, the path to amending humanity's relationship with the earth lies in channeling life-affirming energies into the historical human legacies of symbolic world building. By constructing a deeper engagement with these creative traditions, humanity can forge greater separation from the mechanistic dominance of the megamachine, enabling the development of new ethical frameworks and alternative models of existence, established notably in organic, cosmic, and relational understandings of life. In this view, the human being is not merely a static resource at the mercy of a megatechnical system, but rather an agential participant in the historical unfolding of symbolic construction, contributing to a dynamic reservoir of worldly meaning that transcends the input-output stasis of the megamachine. Whilst Mumford remained a cautious optimist in the 20th century, the 21st century presents the trajectory of potential civilizational erosion and collapse, as the megamachine has only extended its hegemony in service to the life-denying forces of global capitalism. Yet, the future may also hold the potential for novel and unpredictable modes of resistance, as well as life-affirming constructions that further challenge the expansion of the megamachine, offering a trajectory for a more balanced and meaningful coexistence.